Welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in for this explainer. Today, we're taking a pretty fascinating leap. We're going to take those abstract, highly theoretical concepts of scalability and literally translate them into concrete, practical API design choices. We're talking about the actual nuts and bolts of how you keep a massive system alive under immense pressure. Because let's be real, absolutely nobody likes being woken up at 3 a.m. by blaring server alarms.
So think back to our previous lesson on linking decentralized identity to ERC-721 tokens. Imagine you built that app on Solana, you launched it, and boom, it goes completely viral overnight. Because Solana is just so incredibly fast, you suddenly have this massive influx of Web2 users hammering your API. It is exactly like a massive unruly crowd forming outside an exclusive nightclub. The demand is totally off the charts. So the big question is, can your API actually survive that stampede, or are the doors going to get ripped straight off the hinges?
Okay, let's dive into this engineering blueprint to keep our highly popular digital nightclub running without crashing. Here's our agenda for today. 1. The API traffic jam. 2. The 3 pillars of scaling. 3. Real-world traffic strategies. 4. The Node.js simulation. And 5. Measuring success. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The API traffic jam, and exactly why unbounded concurrency fails.
Letting every single request into your API at the exact same time is literally like throwing open the nightclub doors and letting 1,000 people rush in all at once. That is unbounded concurrency, and eventually the fire marshal, or in our case, the server memory limit, is going to shut you down entirely. If your underlying RPC node slows down for even a fraction of a second, that unbounded client traffic just keeps piling up. It creates this massive backlog in your proxy. Clients start retrying their requests out of sheer impatience, and suddenly you're completely saturating your database with retries for requests that haven't even finished the first time. It's basically a giant bottlenecked funnel, where everything gets stuck in the neck and the whole system just crashes.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 3 pillars of scaling, or as we like to call it, managing the crowd.
So how do we actually stop the crash? Well, we need an architectural toolkit to manage our club's capacity. The first pillar here is connection pooling. Instead of tearing down and building a brand new connection for every single request, you reuse a bounded, limited set of back-end connections. Think of this as the limited number of physical seats or tables inside the nightclub. By capping this, you drastically reduce the overhead of setting up connections, and more importantly, you absolutely prevent your upstream services from being overwhelmed by all that chaotic connection churn.
The second pillar is resource isolation. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of VIP rooms in our nightclub analogy. You deliberately separate your traffic classes and resources. Why? So that heavy, slow workloads, like, say, a massive data export, cannot starve out your fast, latency-sensitive paths. You basically keep the bulk analytics crowd in one room so they don't block the critical authentication requests trying to get through the main hallway.
And our third pillar is backpressure. If connection pools are the seats, and resource isolation is the VIP rooms, well, backpressure is the nightclub bouncer standing right at the front door. It's the mechanism that enforces admission control when the connection pool is completely full. When the system gets saturated, the bouncer steps in and limits the rate of incoming requests to protect the club from just bursting at the seams.
Now for Section 3, Real-World Traffic Strategies. Let's open up the bouncer's playbook.
How do we practically apply these pillars when our API experiences a massive traffic spike? If we compare our approaches directly, doing absolutely nothing, just running unbounded concurrency, leads to super high tail latency and terrible availability. Your critical endpoints just fail. But if we add a pool and a wait queue, latency increases moderately, but far fewer downstream systems fail. Now the magic happens when you combine a pool with fail-fast backpressure. You get lower latency for accepted requests, and while the error rate does go up for callers who get rejected, the overall stability of your system is preserved.
And that brings us to a really fundamental trade-off, the wait queue versus fail fast. A wait queue is like making people stand in a physical line outside the club. It definitely increases the chance they'll eventually get in, which improves completion rates, but it kills your latency because they're stuck waiting, causing what we call head-of-line blocking. Failing fast, on the other hand, is the bouncer immediately handing out 429 or 503 errors, essentially saying, hey, we're full, go home. Sure, it hurts the individual user's completion rate in that moment, but it immediately preserves the overall stability of your system.
Section 4, the Node.js simulation. Time for testing the architecture. Let's see how all this builds into a practical application. In all of our learning programs at Forge College, we always emphasize that experimenting with scripts in a safe environment is absolutely critical for grasping these engineering concepts. So, we're going to use a small Node.js script acting as the club manager's clipboard. Our simulation has 4 simple steps. First, configure our knobs. Second, run the simulated traffic. Third, actively enforce backpressure. And fourth, report the metrics to see what actually happened.
Setting up our knobs is honestly the fun part. In Node.js, your HTTP agent has a configuration called max sockets. This dictates your pool size. It is your literal club capacity. Then you have your concurrency variable. This represents the total number of simultaneous requests you'll allow to be in flight from your client. Think of this as the bouncer's rules. By tweaking just these 2 variables, you can accurately simulate almost any traffic condition imaginable.
And here is the magic line of code where the bouncer goes to work. A while loop checking if the in-flight size is greater than or equal to concurrency. This loop right here is our explicit backpressure mechanism. When the number of active in-flight requests hits our concurrency cap, the system explicitly pauses. It actually waits for a promise to resolve, meaning a previous request finishes before it launches another one. It's elegantly simple, but it's incredibly powerful for protecting those downstream services.
Bringing us to Section 5, measuring success through observability signals. Remember, a bouncer is only as good as the instructions they're given. You simply cannot optimize what you cannot measure. The essential metrics we need to be tracking here are active connections, queue length, latency percentiles, error rates, and overall throughput. So, the crucial point is that these metrics are exactly what convert observed system behavior into concrete tuning actions. They're what tell you if you need to shard your connection pools or if you need to tighten up your admission limits.
Let's talk about the big one for a second, P99, or the 99th percentile of latency. I want you to think of P99 as your ultimate user experience grade. It basically means that 99% of your requests are faster than this specific number. If your P99 is terribly slow, it means the 99th person in line is waiting an agonizingly long time. This is a massive red flag indicating head-of-line blocking in your wait queues, and it means your current scaling strategy is actively failing your users.
When we actually run our script and lower the maximum sockets, we simulate a situation where our backend capacity is suddenly strictly limited. As this capacity drops, that fail-fast backpressure kicks in, and the failure rate, those 429 errors, inevitably increases. Your pool actively starts rejecting requests to save the server. It sheds the load exactly as it was designed to do, ensuring that the overall system can actually survive the spike.
So what's the actual operational takeaway here? It's that you map your metrics directly to actions. If your P95 latency is spiking, you don't just panic. You shrink your non-critical connection pools to give a little more breathing room to the important stuff. If your database is reporting high connection weights, you actively throttle your non-essential writes. You use the test harness to vary the pool size and concurrency, and you literally let the resulting metrics tell you exactly what scaling action to pull.
I want to leave you with this absolute golden rule. Defend your scaling decisions with data rather than guesswork. Look, it is very easy to just guess how many connections a server can handle, but doing the math, running the simulation, and observing the hard metrics is how you move from being a hopeful developer to a master architect. These empirical mappings are everything.
Well, we've successfully survived the nightclub stampede today. In our next explainer, we're going to dive into load testing and error handling frameworks, where we'll take all these principles and build incredibly resilient retry strategies to handle absolutely whatever traffic comes our way.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. If you found this breakdown on API scalability helpful, I highly encourage you to head over to forge.college to master even more Web3 engineering skills. But before you close this out, I want you to ask yourself this. Are you finally ready to stop guessing at your architecture and systematize these experiments into repeatable, automated load tests? Keep experimenting, keep measuring, and I will see you in the next one.